Of several final presentations for today. We have Miss Killiann George with us, and we've asked her to answer 3 questions for us. The first of which is, who does she aspire to be as a teacher? The second, what experiential opportunities is she engaged in to become a better ed teacher? And third, how is she prepared to maximize her student teaching internship, which will happen at Dover in the spring. We will have 30 minutes on the clock for her to deliver her presentation, and then we'll have 10 for questions from the group. So we'll ask for you to hold your questions to the end. We also we'll have Jess monitoring our Facebook and Zoom audience to see if we can have any questions from that audience as well. So she will interpret those. Killiann, they are all yours.
Hi everyone, my name is Killiann George. My teacher name is Miss G. How are you? This is about where you respond with some headlines. I'm good. I'm excited to see you all for my final presentation. So throughout my presentation, you'll see some QR codes that will take you to some supplemental handouts. It'll take you to the folder, but I'll try and reference the folder that y'all should be navigating to. Just so that we could see some of my handouts for today. But thank you all for coming, and I'm super excited to get started. So as any good teacher does at the beginning of a class, we outline our goals for what we're trying to accomplish. So as Dr. Curry alluded to, we have 3 goals that we're trying to accomplish today. And those are in the forms of questions of who do I aspire to be as a teacher? What experiential education opportunities have I engaged in to become an agricultural educator? And last but certainly not least, how am I prepared to maximize my student teaching internship opportunities? Well, before we get started, I want to introduce to you who Killiann is outside of the classroom. I am a proud dog mom to a 10-month-old corgi puppy who is my best friend. I'm a travel enthusiast, both domestically and internationally. And I am a lover of all things quotes. And so throughout the presentation, you'll see a couple quotes that'll flash up on the screen, and we'll talk about that as we go through it. So to start off today, teaching kids to count is fine, but teaching kids what counts is best. And so this is something that I really focus in on as who I aspire to be as an agricultural educator, because I can stand in the front of the classroom and lecture at students and teach them content all day, every day. But that's not what matters. What matters to me is that I'm forming young, impressionable leaders that are going to make a positive impact in their communities. And you'll see that as in my teaching philosophy, which that QR code, if you go to the folder that's titled Mission, Vision, Philosophy, you'll see more details on that there. But my teaching philosophy really can be summarized into 5 key themes. I'm looking to be a supportive educator inside and outside of the classroom. I want my students to know that I care about them as human beings and not just numbers on a roster. I want to use effective and creative teaching methods to be engaging in the classroom. This is some really cool, fast-paced, ever-changing information that I'm sharing with my students, and I want them to be at the forefront of that. I want to continue to stay relevant. As I said, the agricultural industry is ever-changing, right? And so I want to continue to be learning and growing as an educator, both in my content knowledge and my delivery. And last but certainly not least, I want to make a positive impact on my students. At the end of the day, I don't really care if they know the inner workings of a cell. What I do care is that they know how to be productive, positive human beings in their communities. So to accomplish all of these things that I want to do inside the classroom, I've outlined a pretty basic classroom management plan, and I went with the theme of less is more. So you can also see my posters up here. I tried to make them big so that everybody could see them because I am also blind. But my classroom procedures are pretty much come in, get to work right away. Use your iPad effectively. The student teaching placement that I'll be at, every student has an iPad. They're a one-to-one district. And so I want students to be using that for educational purposes and not watching the soccer game. I want them to be signing in and out of my classroom just so that I know where they're at. And last but certainly not least, I just ask that they keep me in the loop. If they need an extension, if they don't understand the information, having that open line of communication is super important to me. I do have some pretty high expectations though for my students. And that's that they're bringing their best to class each time, that they're maximizing their time. We are on an 80-minute block period, but those 80 minutes fly by quickly. I want them to communicate effectively and respect everyone. And last but certainly not least, leaving their space better than they found it. Dover has a brand new facility. It's only 2 or 3 years old. I want my students to recognize and respect that because they are blessed with the facilities that they have. And not that anybody wants to ever implement them, but I do have some classroom consequences and I try to align them with my district's already outlined consequences. And so instead of like step 1, step 2, step 3, it's more like classes of behavior. So like class 1 of behavior would be addressed with a verbal warning. If it's a more serious behavior, we're looking at a write-up and communication home with guardians just to ensure that there's nothing going on at home that I need to be aware of. And last but certainly not least, if it's a dangerous behavior, students will be removed from the classroom and sent to the office for an office referral. So if I had my dream program, this is what it would look like. We would be at least a 2-teacher program, and every student would funnel through an intro to AFNR. They would then have the opportunity to either funnel through an animal science pathway, a plant science, an ag mechanics, or an ag leadership. They would also have the opportunity to bounce between pathways. However, this is like the most way that like the curriculum would be scaffolded. However, we would probably follow a ag general zip code. That way they had the flexibility of classes. Something that really strikes my interest that I would be super jazzed to teach is an international ag class, which I know might also poke some brains at those in the room. So I am all about hands-on integration, getting down and dirty with the learning, right? And so one of the ways that we can do that is through a $15 project or a free project, because free is for me. And so for my $15 project, I assembled a horseshoe boot rack. And if I was doing this in my classroom, I would scale it down even more to a single pair of boots, so just 2 of the horseshoes. So that students could put them in the bottom of their welding lockers, and then they could keep their welding boots in their lockers upright, not jumbled with everything else. But I sourced all of the horseshoes and the rebar from around the farm, and so that's why they're all different sizes. So yay, sustainability. I am also a firm believer in the 3-circle model and implementing all of those into my classroom. And so for me, that looks like SAE for all and all of that it encompasses. Something that I intend to do in the spring at my student teaching placement is every student in my small animal science classroom will have a foundational SAE of career exploration. And so every week they'll be required to turn in some sort of career exploration activity. It might be a fact sheet, it might be a presentation, things like that, but focusing on that. And hopefully then, as they would continue to take future ag classes, that would grow into an immersion experience. Also, something that I really want to do in the spring is FFA Fridays. At Dover, we are blessed to have 30 minutes every day, excuse me, in the middle of our class periods called MMA. It's a structured study hall pretty much. So that period, I would encourage students to come and practice for CDEs or LDEs and things like that. We did create a recruitment event because recruitment and retention of students in a program is super important. Without the students in the seats, I don't have a program. And so my group tried to make an office themed video, and we'll watch a few minutes of that here today. We'll let Jess get the technology.
And watching me teach them about pigs. Come on in, Killiann. It's good to see you. You can actually just come on in and take a seat. We're just getting ready to talk about our next recruitment event, which is a pizza party happening next week. Yes, Killiann?
What else is coming up?
We actually have state FFA convention coming up, which is right around the corner, and you're invited.
Killiann, I'm so excited for your first state FFA convention.
What the heck is happening?
Well, the state FFA convention is when members from all over the state come to the Pennsylvania State University and compete in different career development events, leadership development events. You make new friends along the way, and the state officers get elected.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and if you win, you get to go to the Big E or National FFA convention.
Awesome, I think we're ready to get back to the regular scheduled programming. But we tried to theme our video around the office and try to stay current with our students. Dr. Curry has his own opinions about how well we match that theme, but we thought we had some fun doing it. But bringing in some specific strategies, I want, as the agricultural educator, I really want to focus on being present at a variety of events. I want my students to see me outside of the classroom. I want them to see me at the wrestling matches. I want them to see me at the choir concert. I want them to see that I'm interested in what they're interested in, right? And bringing in those different types of students is how we intend to grow and diversify our programs. Another strategy that I plan to implement is to create accessible recruitment resources, matching students' languages and barriers and things like that. And ensuring that it's accessible for not only the students, but also the parents is super important to me. And I intend to work with the resources inside my district to help me accomplish that goal. Yeah.
I always love taking kids to
We're not playing video. Alrighty, so bringing in the community is also super important to me. And the way that I hope to do that while I'm at Dover is to lean on their alumni and supporters. I had the opportunity to attend Big E this past fall with Dover, and one of their students that was still competing was actually an alumni member. And we had a conversation about them coming back and helping at a variety of different events. So I'm sure that there's more of those students out there, and I'd love to lean on them as resources. In addition, I want to continue to focus on community service outreach. They have garden boxes at Dover that aren't being utilized super efficiently right now, and that's something that Alex and I had talked about. And while I won't be teaching plant science, I'd love to come up with a strategy of how those could be better utilized. In the future of my own program, I fully intend to apply for grants. Free money is great, and I want to find free money for my students to be able to do some really cool things. And I also tend to implement community-based units of instructions to bring in the community to share their resources through a variety of different units, especially the ones that I am not confident in. I think that my students will be better served in that manner. So we've accomplished goal 1. Moving into goal 2, what experiential education opportunities have I engaged in to become a better ag educator? Time for a quote break. He does it with his hands by experience, first in play, and then through work. These hands are instruments of a man's intelligence. So I talked about how important hands-on experiences are for my students. I don't want them to feel like my classroom is work. I want them to experience it firsthand, to have fun, to be curious, to have positive experiences. They have plenty of times to sit in a desk and be lectured at about curriculum that they don't necessarily see the direct application for. So I want my classroom, as Carly said in the last presentation, to be that breath of fresh air. So some courses that have influenced me that I've taken while at Penn State. Starting off is my AE 499, Exploring Agricultural Education in Belize. God bless Dr. Ewing's soul for taking me on my very first plane ride. 6.5 hours to Belize was a great time, but it was a life-changing experience where I really got to be immersed in the culture and learn some really cool things about agriculture. Taking from some content knowledge, the most impactful class that I had here at Penn State was my Animal Science 201, taught by the one and only Dale Olver. That man gave me some awesome curriculum moving forward, and definitely holds his students to some pretty high standards. And I was pretty excited when I did well in that class. Moving into AE 204, Science Literacy. This class I actually took as a student, and then I had the opportunity to TA the class, and it's all about bringing complex agricultural concepts and misconceptions and distilling them down into a consumable manner so that our general public has a better understanding. This class as a TA taught me how long it takes to grade projects. And so while project learning is great and super beneficial, I need to keep in the back of my mind how long it takes to give feedback. As we saw in the beginning of my presentation, I took an American Sign Language 1 class. And one of the impactful experiences that I had, I actually just completed yesterday because Canvas is mean and doesn't always save the videos. but it's story time. So they encourage students to use the different handshapes of letters to tell a story. And the reason that they use this for new language learners is that it encourages you to think about how to show the language and not necessarily look for an English word that matches to a sign. American Sign Language is its own language. It is not a representation of English. And the last class that really jazzed me up was a political science class. And we'll talk about a little bit more about that journey in a little bit. But it was my international politics class, and I love all things global experiences. And so this class was really super exciting for me because I got to see the connections of different countries and how they work to make the world literally spin. Some professional development activities that I took part in was both the PAA and NAA conferences, and those are just associations for agricultural educators. But being able to network both locally and then across the nation was super impactful. I learned a lot of really cool strategies that I'm excited to implement in my classroom in the future. We also were put through an intense inquiry institute that's all about student learning and student-directed learning through the problem-solving method. Last two more experiences. My cohort was the inaugural class of the PSU Ag Ed Bootcamp, and that was a crash course of all things lesson and unit planning, and really set us up for success moving forward because we had the tools in our toolkit to hit the ground running and start getting some of those lesson plans working. And last but certainly not least, I've had the opportunity to attend the National Convention as a student, as a teacher candidate, and as well as an employee. And all three of those experiences gave me a different perspective of the youth organization as a whole. They tell me I'm certified in these areas. I'm not too quite sure about some of them, but I do have a minor in international agriculture. I have a concentration in political science. And then I have some certifications. I have CPR and first aid, both in human and cat and dog, so I can save Shelly and Sally at the same time. And if you were in my lab, you understand that reference. I'm also YQCA certified. If you're familiar with the PQA certification, this took its place. So I'm certified to teach that. And then I'm also certified to safely teach students how to drive a tractor. The debate is still out on that one. And last but certainly not least, I put a special skill on there. I have a basic level of ASL, both interpreting and giving it. Some supportive experiences that I've taken part in up until this point is for 4 years, I worked in the Center for Personnel and Professional Development as a student worker. My wonderful managers are in the back of the room. Bless their hearts for putting up with me. I also served as a Teach Ag Avenger, which is more of a recruiting role for the program. This past summer, I worked as a Land O'Lakes member relations intern. And if you know anything about me, I know about this much about dairy cows. So it was a huge learning curve, and I was really excited to learn that content knowledge to be able to better support my students in the future. And last but certainly not least, probably one of the most life-changing experiences that I've had the opportunity to take part in is I served as a Pennsylvania FFA state officer 2019 into 2020. So I was the start of COVID. So I really am focusing on meeting the needs of my students, and all of these experiences has helped to get me to that point. Some previous experiences that I would fall back on is traveling abroad to Belize. If you think you know what agriculture is, I challenge you to travel abroad because it'll give you a new perspective and a pretty big eye-opening experience. Falling back, excuse me, for our culturally responsive training that we gained through our methods class this semester was also super impactful. And then relying on those cultural lessons that I learned through my ASL class as well. Moving forward, I really want to focus on multiple language labeling in my classroom. That was a strategy that we were given during our culturally responsive training. And making sure that if we're labeling things in English in our classroom, there's absolutely no harm in labeling it in other languages as well. And last but certainly not least, I want to provide flexible seating options in my classroom for students like me who have a hard time sitting still and staying focused. Flexible seating options are a really simple way to meet those needs and to keep them on track. So last but certainly not least, how am I prepared to maximize my student teaching internship opportunity? One last quote break. All students can learn and succeed, but not in the same way and not in the same day. And that really touches on meeting the needs of my students. In my teaching philosophy, I hint at this, but I'm a firm believer in every student, every voice, every day. Every student in my classroom matters every day, even the ones that make me want to pull my hair out, or the ones that challenge me. They matter, and I want them to succeed. And so I am blessed to be going to Dover Area High School, which is ran by 3 teachers, as they run 3 different zip codes, and we'll talk more about that. They are a suburban district of over 200 plus members. Some strengths of the program is that they have a wide variety of students and also curriculums. Like I said, they teach 3 different zip codes. So what that means is they teach general ag classes. They also teach horticulture classes as well as ag mechanics, which is really rare for a program in the state of Pennsylvania. They also have an extremely supportive department and administration, which is always nice to have because you tend to not hear the no's as much about experiences and a lot more misses. Some areas of improvement that my CT and I have discussed is we really want to see the SIE flourish, component flourish in Dover, and get some more students to be applying for some of those award programs that go along with that. As I talked about, their facilities are absolutely beautiful. They do have a state-of-the-art greenhouse, and we see Secretary Russell Redding checking that out when it was first opened up. They also have community garden boxes that I'd love to see being utilized a little bit more effectively. They have 3 shops. They are shared with the tech ed department, but they have a metal shop, a wood shop, and then like a combination shop. And last but certainly not least, each teacher has their own classroom, and I am blessed because I have 6 functioning lab stations right in the back of my classroom. So I cut down on that transition time, and my students can spend a lot of time getting down and dirty with what they're learning. I am teaching 3 different subject areas, and this QR code, I believe if you go to the supplemental handouts, it'll show you a better picture of what I'll be teaching. But I'll teach 7 different units of instruction. I'll be teaching 2 sections of small animal science, a section of welding, yay, and a section of ag business. My area of expertise, I like to say, is in large animal science. I used to say it was in animal science. Haha, fun fact, that's wrong. But I am very excited to get down and dirty with all of these different areas. And I am super, super excited to teach genetics because I actually have some content knowledge there. But I'm very excited. Now, looking inwards, every good educator knows that evaluation and feedback is important, right? I, however, do not believe in strengths and weaknesses. Instead, we have diamonds and coals because, as my good buddy Thomas Gable told me once, every piece of coal with enough pressure can become a diamond. And so I think that my student teaching experience is going to place a lot of pressure on me because we're going into war. Nothing prepares you for war but war. And so some of my diamonds that I think I do really well at is my organization skills. If you look at my lesson plan and unit plan organization, you may think that otherwise. However, it's how my brain works, so that's how we're going with it. I have it linked in Teams as well as Google Drive. And then I also have it backed up on my personal computer and a hard drive. So I will not be losing any of my lessons because that is probably one of my greatest fears right now. I am always willing to give it a go at least once. If I was saying that I was super jazzed to be teaching welding, I would be lying to you. But I am willing to give it a go and at least give it a shot. And I'm super excited to at least be able to team teach that so my students will have somebody there who knows what's going on. The last but certainly not least, if you haven't gathered it throughout my presentation, I am very student focused. At the end of the day, it does not matter what I have to say. It doesn't matter what I want to teach. It matters what my students' needs are and that they're being met. And so I am super, super student focused. Some coals that need some pressure to become diamonds is I don't like to give things to other people. I am poor at delegation. My family members here in the audience can probably testify to that I am the one who tries to do it all until I physically cannot. And one of my goals that I'm not super proud of is I really struggle with imposter syndrome. I don't always believe that I am qualified to stand in front of 25 young, impressionable minds. So I try my best to make sure that I am showing up and bringing my best to the class every day, even though it may be a train wreck by the end of it. So some professional goals that I have for myself is finding a balance, and I chose my best friend to showcase that picture because my dog reminds me never to take life so seriously and that it's okay to play. As long as we're keeping our listening ears on. And this picture was a challenge to get. Also, when we were in NAAE in Vegas, we were challenged to set a goal for ourselves for the week. And my goal was to lead without fear and really focus on that imposter syndrome. And so one of the ways that I actually did this, I don't know why we did this, but we did, is my best friend Morgan and I went ziplining 7 stories high, 2 street blocks above Fairmont Street. We survived. That is the picture from the end. We are excited that we lived through that experience. And then last but certainly not least, I went to Learn Forever. This picture was taken from the classroom that I actually got to teach in while I was in Belize. And it was our class mission and motto. And they're all about utilizing their past, their present, and their future to continue to learn and build upon and grow for the better. And last but certainly not least, I have some thank yous to give out. So starting with these goofy goobers on the screen, I hope that I was able to give you guys some content knowledge and keep you all on track and give you some of the tough love that some of us needed, including myself, and making sure that we got all of our lesson and unit plans done. This is the part where we shake our heads up and down that they're all done. Yep, great. I also want to say thank you to my family, both those who are online and those who are in person. Without you guys, I definitely would not have made it through these last 4 or 5 years, and definitely this semester. And thanks for not letting me drop out and join the circus, even though the thought crossed my mind quite a few times. Thanks to the faculty here who keep the program on its wheels and upright and moving forward. You guys are definitely the glue that hold us together. And last but not least, thank you to the professors in the back of the classroom for showing us that tough love that we needed and not taking complaints as excuses. And giving us the best curriculum and preparation that we could have to go into student teaching.
Thank you, Killiann. Again, if you're online in Zoom or Facebook, we would encourage you to put those in the chat, and Jess will help translate those as they come in. For now, we're going to ask that we would go to questions. Killiann, I'll start us off with a question. You did help, and thank you for all your help with 204 last semester, helping with that class. We talk a lot about critical thinking and how we not necessarily teach students what to think, but how to think. Maybe give me some strategies you have moving forward in student teaching on how you can help foster that mindset.
Absolutely. So our students today, especially after COVID, want to know what to think, right? They want to know how to get from point A to point B to point C, and they want me to tell them that. Critical thinking is, here is point A, y'all figure out how to get to point C. And so through that Inquiry Institute, we were doing some specific strategies of giving students challenge questions and giving them the background knowledge and then giving them an expected outcome of what we could see and giving them the reins and saying, here you go, figure it out. As a teacher, that is scary, right? Because when we're lesson planning, we have absolutely no idea how this conversation is going to go or what direction it's going to go to. But giving the students that freedom to explore and dive in and make mistakes and try again and self-correct is super, super important. As a student, it can be really super frustrating. And so I plan to support my students through that. But asking them to think critically and think for themselves is a really important skill that they need to have in the classroom.
Thank you.
Killiann, when we look at that shop project, I want you to tell me what transferable learning skills will result from your ag mechanics project on the table.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, sourcing from what is around you is an important skill. This project, when you price it out, is about 17-ish So we're a little bit above the $15, but we accounted for inflation, Dr. Young, we accounted for inflation. But we sourced horseshoes from around the farm, so that's why they're all different sizes. But in terms of transferable skills, and not just ag mechanic skills, we look at planning, project planning, and considering cost and things like that. We also look at utilizing different resources and realizing what our abilities are, and leaning on outside resources to make sure that the project is up to good quality. And then last but certainly not least, something that I learned is if your welds aren't the prettiest, you can grind them down. They will hold up. They will hold up, I promise. But perfection is not necessarily needed to be reached with every skill if you have other skills that you can rely back on too.
I do hope that no one's missing any horseshoes.
They're all used. They cannot be put back on the horses. I promise I did not pull them off the horses
I
themselves.
do have one follow-up question. You mentioned flexible seating options. I want to give you a scenario and tell me how you would handle it in your classroom. So we have the beautiful Unicorn Sparkles beanbag. There's only one of them in the room. And Sally, Sue, Bobby, Joe, and Curtis all show up at the same time. And by God, they're going to have the Unicorn Sparkles beanbag. How do we handle that situation with only one Unicorn Sparkles beanbag in the room?
Yeah, so something that I focus on in my lessons is variability of activities. So students don't sit and do the same thing for the entire class period, right? There's natural breaks and natural transitions in my lessons. And so I would encourage those students that through those transition periods, that we would also transition our seating arrangements. And so that students would have the opportunity to utilize the Sparkly Unicorn beanbag chair, because chances are I'm also going to want to use that. And so I'm going to want to turn as well. But ensuring that every student has that opportunity to have that flexible seating option. And also knowing my students and what they can accomplish in these different seating arrangements is super important, because maybe Sally sitting in the beanbag chair while we're lecturing is not the most conducive learning spot for her. So trying to gently push that into a different time in our class period is something that I would utilize in the future.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Carson, what do you got?
First of all, great presentation. Appreciated the intro as well. Audie was picking up on every single thing you were saying there. So I did some rough math on a typical salary, extended contract, benefits, and some investment in professional development and the typical time that somebody would stick around high school for their first job. And a district can probably expect to pay $400,000 to $500,000 to have you come on as a staff member. Are you worth that? Why?
So I like to believe that I'm worth that, and not necessarily just me, but any agricultural educator. So I come from a pretty unique situation. I actually attended a high school that did not have an ag program. So I transitioned to a high school that did, because in the state of Pennsylvania, we are blessed that there's legislation that states that if you attend a high school that doesn't have an ag program, they have to pay for you to go to one. Ruffled some feathers there, but it's okay, we made it through. And so just me alone, I was a $12,000 semester student, was the number that was thrown out to me. And so when you start to multiply that towards several students, you see that the value grows exponentially. If we look at our AET, which is our tracking system for SAEs, we have this really cool tool that we can see how much income our students have generated and productively invested into their projects. And hopefully those projects are also impacting the community. And so by bringing in money through our students, through their SAEs, and productively investing in them through that value, I think you can make the case that I would be worth it. In addition, one important aspect that I would be remiss if I skipped over is agriculture is one of the #1 employers in the state of Pennsylvania and across the country, if you look at it as a whole industry. And so we are doing a disservice to our students if we are not setting them up to enter into that career field. And so from that aspect alone, I think that there's a case to be argued that, yeah, 400, 500,000 sounds like a big number, but when you start to look at the value and the impact that you can make in the community, I think that number becomes much, much smaller in a big scheme of things.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
So Ms. Darla Romberger says, great job, Killian. Can you give an example of how you plan to integrate global agriculture into any of the units you'll be teaching this spring?
Yeah, so I am super excited to be teaching at Dover. And in the curriculum that I'm teaching in, and we're gonna have to get a little unique about how we bring in those global competencies. But I definitely think that there's some spaces, especially in my ag business class. So students are tasked to create a business plan, and it's like their semester long project. But the project specifically that the unit that I'll be specifically teaching is the risk management. And so I think that in terms of bringing in those global competencies, instead of using examples of Joe's dairy farm right down the road or the nursery that's up the street, we very easily could be looking at agricultural enterprises across the globe. And that would challenge students to identify risks that are very different than what we would see in the United States. And then having that conversation about how do we help from here, and what strategies can we implement that would work there, across the world as well as at home. And what do you got?
What was one of the biggest challenges that you had to overcome in the past couple semesters, and like, what did you learn from that you can take to your students?
Yeah, absolutely. So I really have a hard time saying no. That vocab word is actually probably like last on the list, which is a challenge as an agriculture educator, right? Because we want to say yes to everything. But the simple fact of that is that's how you burn yourself out real quick and really in a hurry. And so creating a priority list of what things I need to focus on as an educator is how I plan to kind of rely back on that and structure that conversation with my students. So no, we might not be able to do this CDE because I don't have the resources that we need to adequately prepare you moving forward. However, a similar contest that we could utilize that still might spark your interest is this, and here are the resources to do that. So it's never a no and cut off. It's a no, but I'm working on utilizing that word a little bit more frequently as a self-preservation tool. Thomas, what do you got?
So you mentioned in your presentation that one of your pieces of coal right now is delegation. And what I think is also really cool is the fact that often we are working on something as an educator that better equips us to come alongside students that face that same problem. So let's think about either during student teaching or a future chapter president who wants to do it all. They're so excited and they have a really hard time delegating anything to the rest of the team. How would you come alongside that student?
Yeah, so I actually was that student. And a strategy that my ag teacher and I had implemented at our chapter officer meetings was a chapter officer checklist. And so in that checklist, once a month, we met as a team and we decided who was going to take what task. And because I was facilitating that conversation, it was a little bit more of a challenge for me to be like, oh, I'll do that. Oh, I'll do that. Oh, I'll do that. Oh, I'll do that. And it let me see like right in front of me, like, you already have 3 things on the list for this week. Maybe we let somebody else do that. And then holding others accountable so that I don't have to worry about going and picking up this task or that task because it's not being accomplished is one strategy that I would implement moving forward. Adi, what do you got?
So you've mentioned like you're a little apprehensive about going into the shop and teaching welding. So I'm curious, have you thought about shop management strategies? One, to help you be able to teach, especially in a content you're not as comfortable with, but also just as a general shop safety and management practice.
Yeah, so a couple things. First of all, in my student teaching experience, I will have the opportunity to team teach. And so having that resource there to kind of help bounce ideas and structure class in that way, as well as a second set of eyes, I am super thankful for. But in my own classroom, something that I'm going to require every student, and I will be a stickler on, is they must pass a safety exam. Like 100% must pass, no ifs, ands, buts about it. And we will work and work and work and work and work before we go into the shop, because if they can't prove to me outside of the shop that they know how to be safe, I'm not comfortable taking 30 freshmen into the shop and letting them run wild. And so in addition, Something that I really want to do, and I haven't quite figured out how I'm going to be able to implement that, just from a facility standpoint, is I want to take my classroom goals and not only have them posted in the classroom at the start of class, but have them posted in my shop somewhere as well, so that when students are starting to get a little bit rowdy or a little bit loud, I can be like, hey guys, let's remember back to our classroom goals, what we're trying to accomplish today. Give me a fist of 5 of where we're at. Have we accomplished goal 1, goal 2, goal 3? And just being present and active in the shop are some strategies that I hope to implement. But I really, really want to focus on working with my cooperating teacher at that point, and utilizing some of the strategies that he has found successful in his classroom as well.
Great presentation, Killiann. You discussed your concentration in political science and some of the experiences you've had there. And I'm curious how you see that connecting to your experience in the classroom and how you might connect your own students to those opportunities.
Yeah, so some of those professional development activities like PAA and NAA also have a legislative like advocacy portion of that. And so that's an area that I'm really super excited to take part in because I have a little bit of background knowledge. And the reason that I was so adamant about getting that poli-sci concentration is because I want to have a seat at the table and have a seat at the discussion, because there is no reason at all that people in stuffy suits should be making all of the decisions about in the classroom when they don't know what's happening, right? And so having somebody who's had boots on the ground and can sit at that conversation or sit at that table and have that conversation and be able to speak the language that they're speaking, and also advocate for my colleagues and my students who are in the classroom is something that I'm really super excited to explore moving forward through those professional organizations. Chris, what do you got?
So you mentioned a lot about how you want to be student driven and how you want to, meet your students' needs. I'm wondering some ways that you're planning on getting to know your students and getting to know their needs so that way you can implement it.
Yeah, so in one of the towards the beginning of my student teaching, when I started to pick up classes, those of us who are going through the program know you don't pick up all of your classes at one time, right? So it's a little bit of a challenge of how do we attack that first day mentality on like day 70, right? And so one thing that I plan to do is utilize Schoology, which is our classroom management system at Dover, and to assign students a get to know you survey. And that way it's an individual thing and they don't have to share out. Also, in my first day lesson plan for my small animal science, I plan to do an activity that's a heat map and to ask some more provocative questions, and provocative in the terms of heated, areas that can get a little bit heated or debatable. And so that I start to formulate ideas of where my students might stand, and so that I know how to direct those conversations in a positive and effective manner. And then also it will help me to set up this classroom expectation of respecting everyone, no matter what our differences are.
That is the time that we have. If you would help me in congratulating Ms. George. Yeah, the residency 214, if you'd wish to retire there, we're going to continue with the closed door portion of the exam. Thank you.
Good so good.
Thanks. Thanks.